Well, hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Power of Your Mind podcast. You're listening to episode number 130. I'm Victoria Gallagher, Law of Attraction hypnotist and #1 best-selling author of the book Practical Law of Attraction: Align Yourself with the Manifesting Conditions and Successfully Attract Your Desires. I'm also the founder of HipTalk.com and HypnoCloud apps, which gives you access to over 500 hypnosis recordings right in the palm of your hand. So be sure to download that app from the app stores. And today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Mark McLaughlin. Dr. Mark McLaughlin is a practicing board-certified neurosurgeon, a national media commentator, author of the book Cognitive Dominance, A Brain Surgeon's Quest to Outthink Fear, and acclaimed keynote speaker. He is the founder of Princeton Brain and Spine Care, where he practices surgery focusing on trigeminal neuralgia and cervical spine surgery. Dr. McLaughlin is also a thought leader in performance enhancement and a physician-hospital relations, and he can be found on the website www.markmclaughlinmd.com. And today, Mark is going to be sharing with us some of his insights about cognitive dominance, a brain surgeon's quest to outthink fear. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks for inviting me, Victoria. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. Today seems to be all about brains. Well, today is the day that I'm interviewing. It'll actually be airing in December, but earlier today I was also interviewing a neurologist. So now I have a neurosurgeon. So it's all about the brain today.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, so let me just cut right to it. So tell me a little bit of your background and how you got started and into talking about and thinking about cognitive dominance.
Sure. Well, I was an athlete in high school and college, and I wrestled at William and Mary, and I was always interested in performance enhancement way back then. In fact, I was lucky enough to have a friend and a mentor by the name of Nate Zinzer, who is a sports psychologist up at West Point. He is the head of the Center for Enhanced Performance up there. But back when I knew him, I was just a kid, and he was a PhD student working on his thesis, so I was one of his subjects. But it really piqued my interest in human performance. And when I went on to college and medical school and then into neurosurgery, I really started seeing the similarities between performance in the operating theater and performance on the athletic field and performance in the business world as well. So I've kept in touch with Dr. Zinzer, and I continue to study and learn and try and practice performance enhancing techniques, which will help me be a better surgeon and share them with my colleagues. And that sort of prompted me to start thinking about a book and what are the lessons I've learned over the last 20 years as a neurosurgeon.
Wow, that is fascinating. And it's interesting, when I'm like literally talking to a brain surgeon, but that's like the quote, that's the famous saying. It's like, well, I'm not a brain surgeon, it's almost up there with rocket scientist, or actually it is up there with rocket scientist. You're like definitely one of the top people that top professions that people think of when it comes to intelligence and the brain and just you know how, how far we can go in our human potential. So congratulations on getting to that point in your life.
Well,
um,
thank you. Thank you. I did, I really thought being an athlete and knowing the anatomy of the brain and seeing how many decisions, like critical decisions that a neurosurgeon has to make in their career, which I estimate in my book to be about 30,000 life and death decisions in the
wow.
last 20 years. I just kind of thought, like, what have I learned from it and what's transferable to everyday life and death decisions? And we do have life and death decisions. All of our decisions are important decisions. And so it's important to kind of take a step back and sort of see what are the commonalities, and there are a lot. There are a lot of commonalities in the kinds how you can make a decision and how you can put yourself in the best position to be the most effective under stressful conditions.
Yes. Well, that brings me to my first question that I'm sure a lot of people have on the tip of their minds, which is what is cognitive dominance?
Sure. It's a military term defined by the U.S. Army as enhanced situational awareness that facilitates rapid and accurate decision making under stressful conditions with limited decision making time. And really what it is, it's just bringing the best version of yourself to any situation. And when I first heard it, I thought, wow, that's how can I get more of that? And what are the things that get in the way of me having that? And so I was really fascinated with the term, and I began thinking more and more about it. It's not about dominating others. It's about dominating your lesser self. It's about looking at situations with a lens that will help you pick apart the critical points of an issue and really dissect it out and see how it relates to your worldview. So it's a way of picking apart problems efficiently and effectively to make better decisions.
Got it. So, can you give us an example of like how this is helping you in your field as a surgeon?
Sure. So part of it comes from defining what are like the rules of your operating system. So I always talk about in the book how surgeons, we work on rituals, rules, and routines. So some of the routines are the way we prepare for the surgery. Some of the rituals are maybe even superstitions, wearing a certain, pair of socks or something into a tough surgery or something like that, which, you'd be surprised. People do that kind of thing. But most importantly are the rules. And the rules that I learned through my residency and that I follow through neurosurgery are things that keep me out of trouble and keep my patients safe. But they're universal rules. So some of these rules are things like never cut what you can't see. That was one of my boss's first lessons he ever taught me. Never cut what you can't see. And that makes sense as a surgeon, but also doesn't it make sense in life too? Never make a
Absolutely.
decision without all the information that you have at your fingertips before you can make that final close of the scissor blades, right? Always leave a drain. That's another one we use in surgery. What that means is have a safety valve. Leave something in at the end that allows for oozing so there's no pressure on the spinal cord after we operate on it. And never worry about a patient alone. Again, I followed that with my neurosurgery, but really I started thinking about that more, and that's really a great piece of advice for life. Like, never tackle a problem that's really tough and tangled and has a lot of tentacles without getting other perspectives, get other opinions. Then you can really address it more effectively. So rules like that are sort of the first part of it. Following your rules, knowing what they are, and sticking to them when things are tough.
Yeah, these are really great metaphors for life. And I could really, really understand how you just don't want to go into a situation or end a situation blindly. Don't cut what you can't see. And leave some sort of a drain. They all, they make perfect sense. So how can everyday people use this concept of cognitive dominance?
Sure. So, in college, I was a philosophy major, and I really, Rene Descartes was one of my favorite philosophers. And Descartes, he invented the Cartesian coordinate system, which is basically the X and Y axis that you learned in high school, algebra. And using that, I had a resident that I trained with. He was one of my mentors, and he used to always graph things. He'd say, "Okay, let's graph my excitement of this certain operation with the time of day." And he would say, "Okay, on the x-axis it's the time of day, and on the y-axis it's my level of excitement or interest in this case." And then he would sort of plot it along the day, and we kind of got a kick out of the joke. As the day got later, he was more interested in passing the case off to one of his minions to take care of so that he could get home at a reasonable hour. But if you think about events in our lives and how can we map them on a Cartesian coordinate system? Well, it turns out that I think you can. And my co-writer and I sort of devised a system where what you do is when you experience something unexpected, when you have something that it's a curveball and it's inducing fear or anxiety, you need to pick it apart. Ask yourself a couple of really basic questions about it. One is, what are the objective and subjective components of it? What is universal that everyone would agree on? And then what is something that's got a nuanced meaning specifically to you? And if you put on the x-axis the objectives and you put on the y-axis the subjectives, you can kind of map out material goods on the x-axis and meaning on the y-axis. So sometimes we experience an event that's materially positive, so that on the x-axis we'd be positive, we'd be to the right of the zero. And we also can experience something that's meaningfully positive for us. Like we have a wonderful performance. Like we go into that business meeting and we have we're at our best. We're in flow and we're performing well. And so as a result, we get a promotion. And so that's great. So then we're in this positive X, positive Y, positive flow. But sometimes we get a material positive, like we get a promotion, but then we realize we're working for somebody, a new boss who's miserable, who we don't respect and we don't believe in and we don't want to work for. And that's a negative. So that's a Y negative, X positive. That puts us in that lower quadrant. That's what I call the calm before the storm. And that's where your brain kind of goes into cognitive dissonance. You think you got ahead, but actually you've got a big problem on your hands and you got to figure it out. So that's when you might need to think about getting a new job or something. So if you can take an unexpected event that's inducing fear and you can map it onto that graph, you can start figuring your way out of it.
Got it. So it's about taking the events and putting those on one part of the axis and then taking the result and putting it on the other side, and that result could be a positive thing or it could be a negative thing. But if it's a positive thing, then we have cognitive dominance, and if it's a negative thing, then we have cognitive dissonance. Am I understanding you right?
A little bit nuanced than that, close. If we have something that's a negative on that y-axis, on the meaning axis, that's definitely cognitive dissonance. If we're in the positive, we actually have something called cognitive consonance. That's where we're acting in concert with our beliefs. When we're acting in concert with our beliefs, we have cognitive consonance. Cognitive dominance is sort of having that 30,000 foot view and being able to toggle both between the two, because there are going to be events in our life that we experience cognitive dissonance. We can't help it. We get a serious life-threatening diagnosis. That's a negative on the y-axis in our meaning. It's also a negative on the x-axis, our material gain. It's not a gain, it's a loss. So we're going to be in those lower quadrants, that worst quadrant where everything's negative. I call the all is lost quadrant. Cognitive dominance is the process of mapping it out and then asking yourself, okay, I'm in the lowest point of my life right now. What is the one micro goal, the one thing I can do to climb up that y-axis, to climb up and follow something that's meaningful to me, that's important to me? And that's how you start climbing your way out of these bad situations. So cognitive dominance, cognitive dominance is sort of toggling between the two, knowing that you may be in an all is lost situation and you need to figure out a way out. I also talk about cognitive dominance as being it's sort of training your brain to be ambidextrous. You know, the right hemisphere is our story-based big picture hemisphere. And it has that's where our gut comes sometimes, our gut thoughts. And our left hemisphere, that's our logical, executive, motor function of logical sequential thought processes. Left brain logical, right brain lateral. And if you can start training your brain to think in both ways, to understand that both of those hemispheres will help you solve a problem, and knowing what quadrant you use, what part of your brain, that's cognitive dominance. It's training your brain into a new way of thinking and analyzing problems.
That's great. It's very sophisticated level of thinking about things, but it sounds like it can really lead to having a much higher quality of life because we can now use both parts of our brain in order to, take us from a stressful situation or event and be able to be able to see the positive aspects of that.
Yes, it's helped me find deep meaning in my career, and deep meaning in things that for many years didn't make sense to me. I mean, as a neurosurgeon, you see a lot of things that seem senseless. You can see terrible suffering. You can see random accidents, and there are times when I felt, wow, what a malevolent world this could be. What a capricious, uncaring world this could be. Um, and as I've matured and really uh, learned and practiced cognitive dominance, I've realized that that's just a mindset. That's one mindset that you can sometimes feel, but there are other mindsets that you can utilize and think about that can really take something that's senseless and make a lot of sense and meaning out of it.
Absolutely. So right now, today, it's October 20th, 2020. And so we're still in this day and age. If you're listening to this podcast from the future, we're still dealing with the coronavirus, the COVID-19. And so I want to just ask, how can we use cognitive dominance these days or any other time when we might be dealing with fears and stress and things that are, a little overwhelming.
Sure. So something, I think, really kind of basic and knee jerk, and then something a little more cerebral. First one, the knee jerk is I want to go back to rules, routines, and rituals. You got to set up some rules for yourself. You got to set up some routines, and rituals are fine too. I like to pray. That's one of my rituals. There's no scientific evidence that prayer changes things, but it always changes me. It always improves my function.
Hmm.
Similarly, you got to come up with some rules, whether they're literally as like machinistic, like I say, I'm not going to eat ice cream unless it's on the weekends. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm going to make sure that I get 4 workouts in a week, no matter what it is, even if it's 15 minutes of being sweaty. um, Set those rules and follow them as best as you can, and then routines follows with you've got to really have in this chaos, you've got to have a rope to tie on to something solid, a solid anchor. And those anchors are having a time for everything, getting up at the same time, generally going to bed at the same time, having a time to decompress before you go to bed. I like to have a little tea and just kind of relax a little bit. So those are important. So you got your follow your rules, have some routines, and use some rituals that kind of will help you get along, whatever that is. For me, it's prayer. Maybe it's some quirky superstition that you have that that's gonna help you get along. And then
Maybe your affirmations or meditation or something along those
exactly,
lines.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. And then, although there's good science with meditation, so you could probably put that in the routines, but it's absolutely correct. And then something more cerebral. I was just going to say that as as we experience chaos, this is literally an unexpected event that we've all have in our lives now. We need to fall back on our micro goals of climbing that y-axis. What are the most important values in your life? Is it helping people? Is it easing suffering? Is it teaching? Whatever that is, and figure out how you can start doing one action that's going to get you closer to that goal. And even if it's, maybe it's comforting somebody, it's reaching out to a friend who is not dealing as well with this as you are. Maybe it's Again, uh, passing on some kind of a lesson to one of your coworkers in a more comforting and more gentle way. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to be a leader, maybe it's creating that list of people that you need to follow up on a regular basis and ask them how they're doing. So that will give you that feeling of meaning, and that'll give you that burst of dopamine that also makes you feel good and makes you want to start moving in the right direction again.
That is great advice. So, rules, rituals, and routines, and then taking little micro steps toward the things that are important to you.
Exactly, exactly. I tell a story, if we have a moment, I tell a
Sure.
story of I was about to do a very difficult craniotomy one day a couple winters ago. And just before I was about to go in and see the patient, I got a call from my father's oncologist who told me that he had just diagnosed my father with AML, which is pretty much a death sentence in an 88-year-old man.
Mm.
And it really shook me to the point where I was ready to cancel the surgery. I just didn't think I'd have the right mindset. It was a Friday afternoon. I was already exhausted. I had done an 80-hour work week, and I was coming to see this patient who needed me and was unstable. He needed the surgery. It was later in the day, not the most ideal, elective setting, but it had to get done. And I just, I wasn't sure if I could do it, but I was the doctor on call, and I didn't have a lot of choices. I could probably postpone it a day, but I don't think my mindset would have been any better a day later,
Hmm.
and would have been another busy day. And so as I was wrestling with this, I said, all right, just go into the hospital, just take a walk in the hallway and get a cup of coffee and start getting into your routine and go see him. And if you shake his hand and you really feel in your heart that you can't do this surgery, then you cancel it. So I walked down the hallway and I got my coffee and I went into the locker room and I got my scrubs on, which is, that's just like a locker room that you're going to go into a performance theater. I got myself there. That ritual started giving me a little strength. And then all of a sudden I heard these words from the Rudyard Kipling poem, if you can treat triumph and disaster, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same, if you can give the unforgiving minute 60 seconds worth of distance run. And all these stanzas from that poem that my father gave me came through to me. And I got to the patient bedside and I shook his hand and I said, I'm not going to cancel the surgery. I'm going to dedicate this surgery to my father.
Oh, ooh,
And this is going
that
to
gave
be
me
one of my
chills.
finest hours. And it went well. And I got him through it. And then I went to go see my dad. And it was a hard thing to do, but that's what cognitive dominance does for you. It helps you take an event that could knock you solidly on your butt, and you figure out a way to make it positive.
That is such a touching, inspirational story, and I just think that there's so much in there because it's about this is about strengthening your mind, and not just being victim to the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but figuring out how can we find new meaning in this situation and become even better as a result of it is what it sounds like this can help somebody to do.
That's exactly correct, Victoria. And you know, it took a long time for me to be able to be that resilient. It didn't happen overnight. And I think that as we begin to, climb that y-axis and get some micro goals under our belt and just stick it out and do what we need to, what happens is we strengthen our neural network of how to figure these things out. We actually create this little railroad track of, I call them railroad tracks, but it's basically a series of neural synapses that become like a, a set of buddies that say, hey, I know you, and we got together last time and we solved this problem. And then literally the more and more you do it, the more you create this neural network that you can fall back on in a crisis. And I'm just lucky enough to have had great mentors along the way, and to have had an opportunity in neurosurgery to recognize that there's anatomical basis to this as well as a psychological basis to it. And
Right.
we can strengthen those synapses, and we can, train our brain just like we train our muscles to react better to unexpected events.
So you really only need to lay the groundwork for the habits that you want to train your brain to how to think. You really only need to lay that, one time, and then, eventually your brain is just kind of mapped in that new direction to think in that new way.
Exactly. It's like when you started to ride a bike and you thought, how am I ever going to balance on this bike without training wheels? And then one day, you went and you rode 10 or 15 feet, and then you fell into the grass. And then the next time you went 25 feet, and then you said, I got it. I can do it. And you remember that that's a neural network. And you
Hmm.
still remember that to this day. We can hop on a bike, even though maybe you haven't been on one for 20 years, and you know how to balance on a bike. It's the same thing when you're solving problems.
Yes, it's so cool. Our brains are so cool. They're just so powerful, and it would be great for people to get in touch with this information and learn this skill and learn how to operate this brain that we're all born with, that is so much more powerful than we are utilizing. And so I just really want to thank you for the work that you do, and for helping people to figure this out. My last
My
question
pleasure.
before we get into just where people can find out more about this is, is this something that people can use to help them just to make better life decisions?
Absolutely. I mean, it's helped me with parenting. My wife and I are parents of 4 children, and they come to you with tough questions sometimes, and you got to think on your feet. And one of the ones I always use is never worry about a patient alone. Reach out if your kid asks you they want to go to a party, an overnight sleepover or something, and you don't feel comfortable about that. Call a friend who's got some older kids and say, hey, look, I don't know, I get something in my gut. Reach out to somebody to bounce some ideas off of. I think those are really important things when you're in a business meeting and you're going into an important business meeting. Figure out a safety valve. Figure out what could go wrong with this meeting, and how do I get a chance maybe to get a second chance. Maybe it's not going the right way I want. Let's figure out an escape hatch, and maybe I can get a do-over down the road after I know what's going on. So these are transferable skills to anything we do in life: parenting, business, working on your own personal performance, as well as taking care of patients.
That is wonderful. That is awesome. So, you've written this book, Cognitive Dominance: A Brain Surgeon's Quest to Outthink Fear. And you also have put together for our audience you have a cognitive dominance assessment that people can get a hold of. Now, what is that assessment going to tell them?
So that's going to sort of give you a state of the union address for you. So it'll ask you some questions, some dilemmas that you're going to need to choose how you would act. And with that, it'll give you some feedback on, there's no right or wrong answer, but it'll give you some feedback on what's the strength of your skills at this point, and how could you potentially enhance that in the future. So it's a little taster for the book, some of the stories and the thoughts in the book, and it's a great way to kind of dip your toes into cognitive dominance.
Great, great. Well, I highly recommend that our listeners go over and take that assessment. And it's over on your website,
Correct.
markmclaughlin.md.com. So, and then I took a peek over there. It's under quiz is the subject that they would need to, the menu item that they would need to click on to get that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
There's a number of blogs there and some other things I've written about, and some of them are related to cognitive dominance as well. So there's a good server of information there.
Wonderful. And then where can people get your book? Can they get that on Amazon and all the places where books are sold?
Yes, it's available on Amazon. The audio version will be available in the next month, and then also Black Iris Publishing is another opportunity. There's a number of excellent books at Black Iris Publishing that you can reach. You can get cognitive dominance at.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for this information and for the work that you've done and enlightening us with these powerful ideas about how we can kind of restructure our brain, in a matter of speaking, to help us to make better life choices and make, just live a higher quality life.
It's my pleasure and my honor. Thank you.
Thank you.